Thanks so much for tuning into Alpha Moguls, a show where we speak to some of the finest investing minds about how they hope to generate alpha in their clients' portfolios over the next 12 to 24 months. Our guest today is Ravi Dharamshi of ValueQuest. Ravi, great having you. Thanks so much for joining in. And on the back of the last 24 months, your clients would be a happy lot because you've generated a significant alpha over a well-performing market.
Thank you so much, Neeraj, and thanks for having me on your show. First of all, wishing you a happy new year and prosperous new year to your viewers as well. Yes, it's been unbelievable 20 months of market rally, and I don't think even the most optimistic minds would have foreseen what lay in store for us over the next. In March of 2020, we could have visualized what's going to happen. So we have all been very fortunate. Of course, thought for people, those who have actually had to go through hardships during this crisis time. So even though this is a health crisis and probably a financial crisis for some lower strata economic people, so can't ignore that, the humanitarian aspect of it. But from market's point of view, it's been a blessing in disguise. And we've spoken about it last year at length.
Yes, we have. So the question is, Ravi, how does one see the next 12 to 24 odd months from a portfolio perspective, portfolio creation perspective? Now, the first fortnight of November, we've had 5 or 6 large global broking houses, strategists come out and downgrade Indian markets to underweight. There have been a number of optimistic Indian money managers who said that over the next 12 months, maybe the index could be a flat line. So if you benchmark to the Nifty, generating alpha could be that much easier. But that notwithstanding, what's your prognosis?
Giving a bullish view at this point of time does sound a little stupid, especially when we are sitting on such great returns. So to sound intelligent, one has to be a little skeptical, a little circumspect. No, but honestly, with every passing day, as the market doesn't correct, the probability of a correction increases. But everybody is playing a different game. You have to understand. The brokers have their clients whom they have to make their portfolio churn. We are here not to churn our portfolio. We are here to create wealth. Buying right and sitting tight is essentially what we aspire to do. So usually I get this question from our clients: is this the right time to invest in the market? I usually flip it to them and I invert and say, is this absolutely the wrong time to be investing? And when I do that, the answer that I come up with is a resounding no. It is not an absolutely wrong time to be investing. Of course, you have to expand your horizon and you have to temper your expectations of return because we are sitting on a rally. So the journey of the 100 rupees that you invest at this point of time might not look like 100 going to 200 in straight line over the next 3 years. But it can be 100 going to 70, going to 200 over the next 3, maybe 4 years. So that is how I explain to my clients that temper your expectations, expand your horizon, but stay bullish. Resoundingly and in a emphatic manner, stay bullish. The opportunities are just starting and expanding in India. And there is a likelihood that this economic cycle can last longer and expand even more over the next few years. So don't be panicky and don't try to be too cute in trying to time the correction. We could have had the same discussion 6-8 months back and we could have reached the same conclusion. I mean, obviously 8 months have gone by and the returns have been fantastic. So I believe at some point of time the naysayers will be right, and there will be a correction and a drawdown. One can't avoid that. That is a feature of the market. That's not a bug. And but you have to keep your eyes on the price, which is the larger picture, that the Indian economic cycle is just about reviving. And it is whatever boom has been happening till now is not a debt-fueled boom. So we are not sitting on an imminent crash. You will get your chances, but you can possibly get a better entry point. I don't deny that. But from a 3-year to 5-year outlook point of view, I think we have to stay bullish.
Okay, so let's try and figure out how would you believe you would want to generate that alpha, Ravi. One, by the answer that you're giving me, I'm presuming that you might be fully invested or hardly any cash levels. And what do you do when you are hit constantly by these classic markers of euphoria, right? There is heightened retail participation. There is a lot of primary issuances. We are seeing what is arguably the big bugbear for India usually, fundamentally, if you will, which is crude prices starting to inch up. And the fact that we've been sitting on a stimulus for a really long time from the central banks, at some point of time, at least even in India, that might start to get weaned away. So what do you tell yourself when you come across these classic markers?
Right. So no doubt about it. All these classic markers are pointing to a fact that maybe from a 1 year perspective, your risk reward is not very favorable. And there might be some readjustment at some point of time. And we don't know to what the market will respond. We might think it might react to stimulus being weaned away, but till now, market has shown no signs of a taper tantrum. In fact, there is a taper, but there is no tantrum that is happening. So yes, at some point, something will trigger a correction in the market. You cannot pinpoint at this point of time. What I am focused on, or what drives me and keeps me bullish, is that I feel I draw a lot of comparison with the 2003 to 8 economic cycle, and I see that this particular cycle can actually be more elongated and can have a much more lasting effect. See, what happens is the lingering effect of the confluence of all the steps taken, which basically converted the vicious cycle that we were in into a virtuous cycle, it's going to last a long period of time. The conditions today are far better than they were in 2003 also. And I'll just explain to you. 2003 preceded, there was a, barring a dot-com bubble, the rest of the markets in that cycle also did not do very well, leading up to 2001, September 11, when that happened. That was the bottom at which everybody gave up on the hopes in equities. But it was followed up by more than 200 bips interest rate cut, the monetary response, the fiscal response. At that point of time, whatever was there, today it's even more than that, as a percentage of the market cap, also as a percentage of GDP also. So a far larger stimulus has been given. The demand conditions globally are far better than they were at that point of time. The demand revival locally has also happened far quicker. Now, also because this particular recession was not some crisis that led to a recession. It was essentially a man-made recession where people were, as explained very well on your show by Nilkant, people were just asked to stop coming to work. And now slowly they are opening up. Now we have the tools to fight the pandemic. So with the tools having been there, the economic impact will only reduce. Rather, the economic impact of the pandemic will only be lesser and lesser. So the opening up itself is a big stimulus to the economy. And add to that the stimulus is being weaned away far slowly than anyone would have imagined. So yes, there are these temporary reasons or in between markers, as you say it, which is going to lead to some kind of a correction. But what people will realize over a period of time is that these things have led to a permanent, not permanent is a wrong thing, but wrong word to say, but a structural shift in the cycle. It has become virtuous from vicious. Just to give you an example, a startup economy was non-existent for all we know, even a decade earlier. Today, so we put in place regulatory policies that help startups. We put in place tax benefits. We put in place a digital stack, which is a public utility. We got everybody on board with Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile connectivity. And then what has happened in the last 2 years is $25-30 billion of money coming into these startups. And this is only second to US in the world. So that kind of money it is the confluence of all steps taken over the last 5-7 years that this money has now started coming in. So what happens is we underestimate the impact of all these small steps taken over the period of time, or in fact they might actually be counterproductive in the short term, like demonetization, GST. There were lots of issues with that, and we have forgotten that these are all great reforms in the long term. And we can argue in isolation about a particular step being good or bad, but in confluence, all these things are adding to rise to a boom in the startup economy. So many factors, and this is now trickling off into you can see there are job market is getting very tight, and even wage hikes are 2-3 times a year in most of the IT companies, and that is now going to trickle on into real estate. Most of the IT workforce is a migrant workforce, and they are the biggest reason for the real estate demand in at least the top 7-8 cities. So that is the trickle down effect that we are already witnessing. Just an example of how it has become a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it was interesting to see Info Edge talk about how the job market is the hottest that they have seen. And I'm glad you mentioned that the confluence of all of these as opposed to individual, because a lot of people will come up and argue that demonetization was not necessarily individually that great. But I think the point is valid for certain particular aspects. Confluence of all of these work very well. So Ravi, if it takes you back to 2003 to 2008, that was a cycle wherein, yes, most ships sailed. Some sailed much further and much faster than the others, as would happen in any cycle, of course. But the old economy, unless I'm very wrong, had a big bang move in that. We're starting to see the first signs of the market starting to like some of the capex old economy themes as well. What's your sense of if this cycle, whether it's happened in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, is separate, but do you think we could have a repeat of sorts out there? Why or why not?
See, no two cycles are the same. Absolutely, we are very bullish that the economic revival is on the cusp, and the capex cycle will also pick up. But the nature and the color of this particular cycle can actually be dramatically different from the previous one. One, because there is this mega trend that is playing out where most of the capital expenditure is getting converted into operational expenditure. These new business models that are coming up, they actually replace your capex with opex. Essentially, when earlier probably I used to, now I have so many subscription. It's a subscription based economy that has come up. My one-time expenditure has been cut down into a smaller expenditure, but over a long period of time for a life. So the lifetime value of customer increases, but for me in the short term, the expenditure that I have to incur has gone down. So that is the case with IT spend. That is the case with some of the other spend also. And most of the boom at this juncture is happening in these kind of business models. Having said that, we are bullish on equipment manufacturing also, but the previous boom was driven by power, real estate, steel, and telecom. These 4 sectors are not likely to come back to the same level that happened in the previous. Maybe real estate does, maybe steel does to some extent, but telecom and power are unlikely to witness the kind of excessive spend that we saw in 2003 to 8 cycle in this cycle. So the nature of the cycle is going to be different, but there is no doubt at all that capital expansion cycle is just about beginning. We have had 6 quarters of good profit growth for most companies, and everybody is looking to expand. The capacity utilization is on the rise, and the demand order book for most of the companies is good 3 years out. So good order book, good order inflows, inquiries level rising, demand for talent is going up. All these are signs that it's the demand that is coming back, and natural progression of that is that as consumption keeps picking up, it will eventually lead to capex cycle. So consumption has come back, probably got a little bunched up and also a little advanced in terms of the cycle, and that is why the capex cycle spillover is also likely to get advanced a little bit.
Okay, I'll come to real estate in a moment, but since we brought up this capex cycle, manufacturing, etc., because there are uncertainties in the near term, and we don't know for how long can this supply chain issues last. Because Ravi, company after company this time around said that we just don't want to talk about Q3 and Q4 right now because we don't know how it will shape up. From an Astral to an Asian Paints to whoever, everybody's facing or grappling with these issues, and now it's hitting the larger companies as well, not just the unorganized space. Is it difficult to build a hypothesis because of these challenges, or are you taking a leap of faith of sorts?
No, I think one can take the leap of faith in terms of the stronger balance sheet will survive. These issues are more operational challenges, maybe a little bit of P&L challenges, and that can lead to a little bit of quarterly volatility in terms of reporting the earnings. But there is no doubt that these issues will sort themselves out. In fact, already we are witnessing some amount of easing of, whether it is in the container freight rates or whether it is in the material commodities in China. The prices are beginning to come down. So that tells you that the tightness in the system will get relaxed. It might happen at different points of time for different commodities, but it is not a structural issue, and it is more a cyclical issue, or hence one can look through these issues from a quarterly point of view, provided you are betting your bet is placed on companies which are leaders or challengers in the space, or the balance sheet are strong enough and their supply chain is strong enough to withstand this. So I think the challenges that were faced when the second phase happened, the second wave happened of COVID, were far greater than what we are witnessing today. At that point of time, there was a real challenge, but we sailed through that. A lot of companies sailed through that in a strong manner. So I would say a little bit of leap of faith is good if your outlook is more than a year.
Ravi, how are you going about choosing within manufacturing? So, for example, I know of your earlier bets wherein you, for example, bet not on the number one pipe, in real estate proxy, a pipe company, but the number 2 or number 3, whichever size it was. You've probably bet maybe on some real estate companies as well. What is your thought around real estate and ancillaries? What's the best way to play it? How are you playing?
No, so we are betting across the value chain. Earlier, yes, we did bet only on the building materials or companies. So earlier, our hypothesis was that the segment that is likely to pick up first would most likely be affordable housing. In fact, what happened was that was the least affected area, but the segment that has picked up the fastest is at the premium end of the economy. With so much of money floating in, for example, all these mid-level executives or higher-level executives that are getting their ESOPs and cash, or there is so much private equity money flowing into companies, that has led to a lot of release of capital for these entrepreneurs, and they are the ones who are leading the charge in terms of buying real estate. So the premium end of the economy, premium end of the real estate is what has actually surprised us positively. So we are not only betting on building material, we are betting on housing financiers, as well as we are betting on developers. So we were a little skeptical about betting on developers earlier, clearly because this sector had its challenges earlier. But now we feel that it has gone through a catharsis, and there is a new dawn that has happened in this sector, and supply shock is clearly there. I mean, a city like Mumbai had more than 1,000-1,200 developers.
Okay.
That number is now reduced to 400, and for all practical purposes, the listed space is down to 10 players. Or if you were to expand, maybe 15 players where there are quasi-real estate players. So when majority of the real estate development is going to happen by these large players, then for sure, I think the pool getting larger and getting shared by fewer players is going to see a disproportionate increase in profits for these companies. So that's how we are playing. We very strongly believe that real estate cycle revival has started. We would bet on building materials, we would bet on developers, as well as we will bet on housing finances.
Okay. The other question, Ravi, is what within the newly formed themes is exciting you more from a portfolio perspective, wherein you would maybe allocate like a significant part of your portfolio? So there's this whole EV juggernaut that seems to have caught the fancy. Power is riding along with. The ethanol players come into that as well, because it may not be EV, but it is clean energy, and therefore that is coming. And we've had the two behemoths in India also talk about green hydrogen. So there's lots happening there. Becomes difficult to try and separate the wheat from the chaff. How are you doing it?
Right. No, so absolutely, you're on the dot. It is a challenge. It's a challenge we grapple with on a daily basis. There is no doubt about it that there is a lot of disruption happening. There are a lot of cross currents in various sectors. If I were to take an example of, let's say, auto or auto anch, we know at one point that there is a disruption coming. There are new challenges coming in the two-wheeler OEM space, and oats versus the incumbents who are actually quite strong in their own right. So I don't have an answer at this point of time who is likely to emerge a winner. But if the valuations are factoring in zero terminal value for the listed OEMs, then I think it's a fairly risk reward is in your favor. Because they are also aware that the opportunity lies elsewhere. And see, this disruption is more about the mode of transportation still remains the same, right? You are going to be still riding two wheels, whatever the machinery equipment that has changed. So it is not such a big disruption that this industry will not exist, or it is not that there are no network effects to this as well. It is there is an opening available for new challenges, and they might come in and take away some amount of market share. But the incumbents too have their strength in terms of their distribution, and they also have invested in the new areas. So what you can do is treat the old business like a cash cow and use that cash to invest in businesses that are disrupting. And
I have a follow-up here, because so maybe none of the newer businesses have positioned themselves as well as Elon Musk did when it came to Tesla. But and I think even my grandmom and your servant have gotten that WhatsApp about how Tesla's market cap or value is this versus the other 10. And the others are also having some presence out there, but somehow in the eyes of the beholder, the value that a Tesla brings, that's why it's valued so much, right? So my question is that, so while the others are doing their bit, do you reckon that the new age companies, because they are completely focused, maybe they are more nimble, will walk away with the spoils in terms of the value in the eyes of the investors?
Right. So see, where the concern for the investors are arising is from the terminal value. Is the terminal value for the incumbents going to remain or no? So if today the valuations are such that the implied terminal value is zero or negative, at least the bet is in your favor. Now coming to who can emerge the winner. See, the mindset is important. The new players, they are coming in with checks written by private equity players who are asking them to go and grab the market share. They are not going to focus on profitability. So if the incumbents can change their mindset, that don't focus on today's profitability, but focus on getting a bigger share of the market that will be 10 years down the line, and then you can think about making profits, then there might be some amount of transition period involved for them, but they will eventually get the wave right. So that is, I think, the clear point that needs to get across. It's very difficult for an incumbent to let go of profits because they are making huge ROICs and they have really good market shares. So to challenge themselves, give away some amount of their profits to seed their future growth drivers is the mindset challenge that you have to first conquer in your mind. And then it is the new age incumbents who actually are not, as you rightly pointed out, are nimble enough, and they are really playing with private equity money. So for them, it's not really so much at stake personally. Even if they lose out, I'm sure there is some strategic value which others might get out of them. So yeah, it is a challenge that incumbents are facing, and they will have to, but they do have a good chance, I would say. I would not write them off. I think they have a decent enough chance to compete in this market.
Okay. The others, Ravi, I mean, this whole ethanol wave,
Yeah.
green energy, etc. Any thoughts here?
No, so energy transition is the one mega theme that is playing out world over, and this theme is going to get stronger and stronger. So no doubt, you might today feel that crude is going to $100 because there is no new capacity getting added, or the supply is getting constrained by the OPEC and the oil cartel of the world. But there is a real question mark on the terminal value of these businesses. There could be 30 years, 40 years, 50 years down the line that we actually completely move away from fossil fuel. So whether to price that today, or whether there is a tactical play in buying these energy companies because of the temporary shortages created in our transition period, that is a separate matter. But the mega theme remains, and there are very few plays available, direct plays available to play this energy transition theme. But we can see it clearly that the investors are betting on the future, and there will be new winners that will come out of this. In India's case, we are going to go through phase by phase. We'll probably move from first to E20, then we will move to E85. We'll then move to diesel coming in, then maybe hybrid coming in, then the full electrification. So it might not happen everything at one go, but the eventual transition away from fossil fuel is certain. What route we take is not certain, and which players might benefit out of this transition depends on the steps that government takes. And at this point of time, it looks very clear that ethanol is their first thrust area. Eventually, that ethanol can move to maybe other compressed biogas, and eventually to hydrogen as well. So the entire ecosystem will develop over a period of time, and there are very few players available on this theme.
Sure. Ravi, lastly, what about the whole portfolio construct aspect? Has it undergone a change simply because of the nature of how the markets are, wherein some themes get rewarded disproportionately? I'm sure it happens every cycle, but this time around, a lot of people are talking about how it was really different. So I'm trying to understand whether the position sizing, whether the allocation, whether the exit decisions, all of that, has it changed for you in the last 24 months compared to what it had always been? You throw some light there.
Yeah, I'll take your point with two examples that I would like to give in how we are doing this. So first is, see, specialty chemicals is one area where we were very bullish on for the last 6-7 years. That is one area where we are reducing. Now, the longer term drivers of this trend are still very much intact, whether it is China plus one, or whether India, promoting chemical production through PLIs. All those things are still in place. But 7 years back, this sector was available at 20,000 crore. Entire sector of specialty chemical, top 25 companies were available at 20,000 crore market cap. This 20,000 crore market cap has gone to now 5.5 lakh crores. Entire sector has been at 21 to 22 times bagger. Of course, there have been addition. There have been 10, 12 new IPOs in this space, and all these things have added. But today, now, we are, in my opinion, if I were to take a quadrant of inflated profits and inflated multiple, I think specialty chemicals definitely flashes red, where the profits are inflated. They have been going on for 5-7 years, and now markets are giving it a multiple which is also inflated. So I would rather focus on areas where, see, it's very difficult to find today deflated profits and deflated multiples. That is not in this market. But there are still pockets where the profits are deflated and multiples are looking inflated more optically rather than actually. So those are the areas where I would focus on. So we are moving away from areas where high profits are getting high P multiple to areas where profits are on the lower side, though multiple might look a little higher. So that is one change we are making in the portfolio. Second is, yes, see, it's a very controversial thing again to say that these new age companies, should one be betting on these companies or no, especially when they lack a list at 10, 12, $15 billion kind of a market cap. But I strongly believe that the value migration is happening towards these companies. There are definitely risks involved. But I don't think the winners of tomorrow are going to emerge from this area. So you can adjust your risk first by not betting on every company in this space. You have to first understand companies that are going to be around 5 years, 10 years down the line. It's a very difficult call to take again. It is not very easy to say if this company will, what happens tomorrow if Amazon enters the BPC space, what happens tomorrow if Amazon enters the food delivery space. So those are clearly the risks involved. But you have to give it to these entrepreneurs that they have created a strong enough moat at this point of time to be either a category leader or one of the last survivors in the category. And there is a lot of value to what they have. Now, if they can expand to other adjacencies without burning too much cash, and I think that will be very credible. And that's exactly what the one of the player is trying to do. So I will name them, but again, I just want to give a disclaimer that it is only for illustrative purposes and not a recommendation at all. So Nykaa has actually done very well in the BPC segment. They have gathered about 8% kind of market share, and that market share will grow. And now with that cash flow, they are seeding the fashion segment as well. There are already strong incumbents over there from the new age businesses as well, like Myntra's of the world. But what Nykaa has achieved in BPC segment is with the minimum cash burn. They have burned less than $300 million. And in my opinion, this IPO was probably one of the last they might be needing to move, unless of course there is an inorganic acquisition at some point of time. But organically, I don't think there is any more cash needed for them to burn to get market share. So if you can find a story like that, I think that's a big plus, that this company is going to not burn cash over a period of time. Yes, they are not at this point of time making the kind of profits, but it's not that the value of this company is zero, right? It might be overvalued, but it is not bubble. A 30% correction, a 40% correction, even a 50% correction, and there is likelihood that this is a company that one should be betting on from a 5-10 year point of view. See, today we are at $3.5 trillion market cap. If India's $3.5 trillion goes to $6-7 trillion market cap over the next 5-7 year period, I am very sure trillion and a half is going to come from these new age businesses. You can take a look at what the top companies of the world look like in 2010 and what they are today. The top companies of today, Apple, Microsoft, the FANG stock, so to say, they were not the top companies in 2010. And once we have seen this kind of a story pan out elsewhere in the world, and we have the conditions similar to them in terms of, we have given the boost to the startup economy, then for sure the winners are going to emerge from this space. However, the probability is stacked against you in terms of picking a winner. Probability is stacked against you that a company, this particular company will be there 5 years, 10 years down the line. So you have to understand that, and the risk management for that has to come from how you size your positions. You cannot be betting your house on it. So as you rightly pointed out, you have to, you cannot ignore the space as well as you cannot bet your house on it. But you have to have some presence and see along the way if you develop the conviction that no, this player is going to be around and is now ready to ride the next wave. I hope I answered your question.
You did, Ravi, in more ways than one, because you just didn't answer my question. You also gave us some other food for thought, so which was quite awesome. I'd like to wrap up this conversation with my usual question to you at the end of an interview, which is the recent great read which you would have come across or which you would recommend to our viewers.
I have to say it on air, Neeraj. I have to thank you for so many books that you are sending me to read. And I still have to get through some of the books that you have sent me. But I think the recent one book that I read and which I really liked is Richer, Wiser, Happier by William Green. And I think that is a good compilation of some of the real good wisdoms and anecdotes from some of the great fund managers. I would recommend it for anybody who is looking to develop their own thought process in terms of developing their own investment philosophy. So I think it was a good read. Otherwise, one book that we have gifted all our clients is Psychology of Money. So see, one more thing that we subscribe to is that you don't have to read new books, but it will be even better if you can read some of the old classics again and again and try and incorporate the learnings from those more thoroughly into yourself. You might be better off. So there is only so much material that you can keep it make it internal to yourself. So it's better that you internalize a book rather than be exposed to more and more number of books, at least in the investment field.
And whatever helps in generating alpha, because that's what this show is about. But Ravi, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much.
I'll just answer that bit, not like you asked a question, but so your opening line was, how are we generating alpha? I think the alpha that we have generated in the last 8 months is through holding on, developing the conviction to hold on, because a lot of people are going to lose their conviction to hold on. And I think if we can manage to do that, as in without getting out of the market, churning the portfolio on the margin from one sector to another, but staying invested, that is what is going to provide us the alpha over the next 2-3 years.
Well, hopefully it is even stronger than what the past 2 years have been, Ravi. But thank you so much for speaking to us today, and lovely having you on Alpha Moguls.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. Lovely having you.
And viewers, thanks for tuning in.